This evening, I'm pleased to introduce Nick Jensen, um, whom I've mentioned before, I've known for many, many years. Um, Nick got his PhD in botany from California Botanic Garden, Claremont Graduate University, and is a Switzer Foundation Fellow. As a graduate student, Nick produced the first flora of Tejon Ranch. Currently, he is the Director of Conservation Programs at California Native Plant Society. This evening, he's going to give us an update on CNPS conservation issues in 2025. So, Nick, welcome.
Yeah, hi everyone. It's good to see a number of familiar names in the audience today, and really appreciate the opportunity to talk to the LA Santa Monica Mountains chapter. As Snowdy has noted, we're starting to go, I would say, way far back. Believe it or not, Snowdy, I think it might be close to 20 years since we've known each other now, and which is surprising. Um, Maybe because time just goes by so quickly, I guess. And when I worked for the Rare Plant Program, back in my first time with CNPS, the chapter was kind enough to take me on a tour of, I don't know, I think it was 6 or 7 rare deadlias in a single day. I have a lot of fun memories and great connections with this chapter, and so I just, I'm going to talk a little bit. The talk today is going to kind of be, it'll go all around the state and be at high levels, and then drill down in other instances. And so, hopefully, there's something that's of interest to everyone in the talk, and I just once again thanks so much. So I'll start sharing my presentation, and then we'll go on a ride through what we've been doing in the past period of time in the conservation program together. So let me find my presentation, and you all should be seeing my screen now. And I'll try and see if I can get this in the presentation mode. All right. So titled the talk, Looking Back, Looking Forward. I'll start out, that's my dog in some native carex there. We'll talk about how special where we get to live is. Some background on CNPS conservation activities and how to get involved, and some resources. And then some recent areas of work, including advocacy topics, some of the work we've been doing on national monuments. Some, unfortunately, it's a popular topic these days, threats to our public lands as a result of the current administration. Some updates on legislation, and then I'll finish up with some talk about our newly formed advocacy corps. So California is obviously, this is probably preaching a little bit to the choir. That is, I'm going to try and hide one thing. I think that's good. So that California is a very special place. There are more native plants as far as from the aspect of diversity, from an aspect of what's been described by Western science, than any other state in the United States. A lot of these plants are endemic. They mean they occur nowhere else. Southern California is also home to the most diverse county with regards to plants in the United States. And one of the things that is also true is that there's a high risk, meaning high threats to our flora, and high rates of extinction, which is an unfortunate thing, obviously. You'll notice or many of you already know this, that the California floristic portion of the state, which is the portion of the state that is under a Mediterranean climate, has been designated as one of our 36 biodiversity hotspots in the United States. This means that what we are seeking to protect here in California is of global significance. And that the all of these hotspots were identified based on their high level of diversity, high level of endemism, are plants and animals that live nowhere else, and lots of threats. So it's kind of a dubious distinction in that it highlights that California is a wonderfully diverse place, but also a wonderfully threatened place. And I guess that's my arrow that just shows where we are, in case you were confused where we are in the globe. The California Floristics province itself, or the Mediterranean portion of California, is about 90% of this of the 90% of which is in California. It's 65% of the area of California. Tons and tons of diversity with 42% endemism. And of course, not to dismiss the portions of the state which are not in the Mediterranean climate portion of California are deserts, including the Mojave and Sonoran and Great Basin deserts, where there are also high levels of diversity and endemism. Lots of threats there too, and still lots of places that are yet fully studied there. So it's pretty much not just the province portion of the state, but the whole state, which is special and worthy of conservation actions. And this is where I like to step back a little bit. You're going to hear a lot of what work is being done by staff. Those of us who are working on as paid staff for the state of California, for CNPS. I have the opportunity to work for an organization, as you all know, that is really an organization that is fueled and powered by you volunteers, by those of you who are watching what's going on at the local level and getting out and going to local meetings and speaking up for the plants and places that we all love. And so I think of the work that I get to do as a paid staff person as just really in support of all the work that you all do. But just a little to focus on this is the four the Hollywood squares on the right of the screen. Those are the staff people that work and under or with me, or that I get to work with as the director of the program. Isabel and Brendan and Kara are the staff that some of you have already probably interacted with. And this is just not just the work that the conservation program does, but like highlighting some of the work that we do, which is we comment on environmental documents that are CEQA and NEPA, the California Environmental Quality Act, and the National Environmental Policy Act. We do work on public land management advocacy. So, for example, what's going on in national forests and BLM lands. A fair amount of work on wildfire and fuel management. Some of this ends up resulting in some strategic litigation or lawsuits that are filed and hopefully to protect places or make the projects that are proposing them better in the end. We've done a lot of work on national monuments in collaboration with other organizations and tribes and chapters in recent years in support of the effort to conserve 30% of our state by 2030. And then we do a lot of collaboration with our public affairs staff on issues related to state and federal legislation, and we even on occasion sponsor legislation. For example, one that I was involved in pretty intimately was our effort to make it officially illegal to poach Dudleya, which was AB 223, which passed and became law in, I think, 2022 or 2023. The years I'm not so great on the dates anymore, I guess. That's some of that work. So also some opportunities for you to get involved or stay involved. These are open to anyone who wants to be involved, wants to attend these meetings. These are some regular conservation related meetings. We have our conservation chairs. It's not just chairs of local conservation chapter conservation chairs who are welcome. It's pretty much anyone who would like to learn more about what's going on around the state. From 10 to 12 on the first Tuesday of the month. Snowdy mentioned the wildfire community. This is something that is led not by staff, but by volunteers, specifically Alice Kentelow of our El Dorado chapter. Third Tuesday of the month from 10 to 12. We have a group that discusses the conflict between solar energy development and habitat in the state on the third Wednesday of the month. We have a group that looks at the impacts of cannabis growing on primarily on public lands. The first Friday of the month. That one's been going for many years, for several years now. And I'll talk to you a little bit about our newly formed advocacy core later on in the talk, towards the end of the talk. We have produced over the past couple of years some resource, what we think is a pretty cool resource, our Conservation Advocacy Toolkit, which is really centered on how to comment on local projects, those projects that require review under the California Environmental Quality Act, or CEQA. It includes a comment letter database, which are sample letters on a wide range of issues that you can look up and model your own comment letters after, and a wildfire science database. So those are of use to anyone and available free of charge. Anyone who has an access to it, it's ct.cnps.org. And then I would like to highlight myself and my 3 colleagues on staff as a resource to you. We're here to help. We always like to hear from you. We want to hear from you and about what's going on and how we can best assist you to do advocacy at the local level. I can honestly say some of the best work that I've ever gotten to do is as a result of issues that have been brought to our attention by our local chapters. And it's always a joy to work with you. So if you have questions or want our advice or our assistance, you can email that email address goes to all of the conservation staff folks, but you can also reach out to us directly if you have our email addresses. I'll make sure you have that. So transitioning now to some of the work that we've been doing in recent times. It's no surprise to anyone at all who has followed the environmental movement in California and elsewhere over the past several years. When housing development projects are sited on areas where there is a great conflict with native plant and rare plant population, native plant communities and rare plant populations, we end up with some conflicts that need advocacy work. Of course, we advocate for infill in urban areas that avoid these conflicts, but when these do occur, it requires some advocacy to hopefully make these projects better. Some examples of these, and some of these one of these is active, and some of them are farther down the road. Many of you may have heard of a new proposal in eastern Solano County to construct a whole new city of 400,000 new people on some of what our vernal pool expert Carol Witham says is one of the last best intact areas of vernal pools left in the state of California. They're currently exploring an option of annexing a huge amount of land that is adjacent to Suisun City. So expect to hear more about that in coming years. We have a project that recently settled, which was a resort-style development in Lake County that was proposed largely on serpentine habitat. We filed a lawsuit with the Center for Biological Diversity that we ended up settling with much improved mitigation for rare plant and wetland habitats. So that's an example of what can happen when towards the end of project level advocacy. A project in Riverside County, which is the site of one of the oldest organisms on Earth, the Harupa oak, which we are currently in ongoing litigation with some partner organizations. And then Centennial is a project that I worked on, one of the first projects I got to work on when I joined the staff at CNPS in the conservation program, a Los Angeles County project, where we have filed a lawsuit along with the Center for Biological Diversity. It's ongoing. The latest news is that there was a favorable appellate court ruling that we're happy to have had, and so we continue to fight on that as well. Some additional project level advocacy continues to unfortunately be with poorly sited solar projects. Couple examples of those, and one more in the following slide. A disturbing project east of Redding. So it's not just a desert issue, unfortunately. There's solar being proposed even on vernal pools in the Sierra foothills. But we continue to track many projects in the desert areas of the state. One of particular concern is one that's immediately adjacent to the Mojave National Preserve, kind of really close to the town of Baker. That is called the Soda Mountain Solar Project, which is we're awaiting a draft EIR. This is a project, many projects. If you've followed conservation for enough time, you'll know that there are projects that surface and then go dormant because of advocacy or other reasons, and then they come back. Soda Mountain is one that's coming back, unfortunately, and that will require a concerted effort from the environmental community. And when we were chatting before my presentation, Snowdy mentioned this project, which is, I would say, literally too close to home for us here in Sacramento County. That's where I have the pleasure of living here in the city of Sacramento. Project that was recently approved called Coyote Creek Agrivoltaic Ranch. Kind of preposterously a project on a couple thousand acres of land in the eastern part of Sacramento County that would remove 3,400 or more than 3,400 oak trees, the majority of which are large, massive blue oak trees, estimated at least 800 years old. There are, I don't know, dozens of blue oaks on the property that are slated for removal that are greater than 4 feet in diameter, which is I'm not even sure I've ever seen a blue oak that large in person. Also lots of rare plant impacts and inconsistency with county policies. This has resulted in a lot of activity in the local environmental community here in Sacramento. In fact, as we speak, there is a community meeting that's being held at a local garden center, or local meeting place where members of various organizations and concerned members of the public are getting together to figure out what can be done to influence this decision, influence this project post decision. There were, I don't know, there were hundreds of people that showed up at the Board of Supervisors meetings where this project was ultimately approved. And there's been the tribal interests have been involved, the environmental community, and even the OHV community because of impacts to an adjacent state vehicle recreation area called Prairie City. This is an example of how a poorly cited project really can galvanize an entire local community. Carol Witham, who is many of you might know because of her long tenure of work with CNPS as an advocate and in other various roles, has said that this has galvanized the environmental community in the Sacramento area more than any project that she has seen in at least 20 years. So that's saying something. And just mentioning that I've already mentioned litigation or the filing of lawsuits that can be brought by members of staff or chapters and individual members. This is approved by our board of directors and can be brought on behalf of the interest of the plants and habitats of California, and noting that this can be time consuming, costly, and risky, but it is, if we want to stay involved, is our last and best resort option. And at some points, staying involved in project level advocacy through filing litigation can result in really good wins. Like, for example, the Point Mulade project, which is the East Bay chapter, along with other organizations, has been involved in. It was a site of a proposed development, and the area is actually not going to be developed. It's going to be conserved. I mentioned Centennial, which is a project that we are continuing to be involved in. It would be a wonderful conclusion if the Centennial project site ended up being conserved, which is, I think, what our ultimate hope is. And likewise for projects like Rio Vista, which is the site of the Harupa oak, one of the oldest organisms in the world. I think that it's an oak that is estimated at being somewhere between 12 and 14,000 or so years old, which is remarkable. We, along with our local chapter advocates, we continue to monitor a bunch of forest health projects. Forest health is often not always a bad thing, but it sometimes can be a euphemism for clearing of vegetation. Um, there's been a large it was a huge flurry of these environmental assessments issued by the Forest Service on the Plumas National Forest, several that are more than 100,000 acres in treatment scope. We've done a lot of project level tracking of those, and we continue to track other projects around the state on our national forests. And an example of that, pretty close to home for you all in the LA Santa Monica Mountains chapter, just a little bit to the north and to the west, I suppose, is a project called the Los Padres Wildfire Risk Reduction Project, which we have been tracking along with some of our local chapters for years, waiting for them to publish their environmental document. It's for another Forest Service project, 90,000 acres, which unfortunately would treat mostly chaparral habitat. We did a lot of coordination with our chapters, including Monterey Bay and San Luis Obispo and Channel Islands. Plus our, I see it's always good to see a misspelling in your own talk, but Los Padres Forest Watch, there's too many E's in that one. We were able, through some funding, to also work with some attorneys to actually make sure our comment letters were as good as they can be, and got some support letters from academic support and comment letters from Bruce Baldwin from the Jepson Herbarium and Alexandra Seifert, who's a wildfire expert extraordinaire. And we produced a powerful package of comment letters that focused on the increased risk of ignition, the risk of type conversion of chaparral habitats by fuel treatment, and also impacts on rare plants. And now we wait to see how the Forest Service is going to respond to our comment letter and the comment letters of so many other interested citizens and organizations. Conservation is a long game. Transitioning a little bit to something that is a little bit more positive, in case you needed a palate cleanser from what is going on as far as the kind of the nuts and bolts conservation work, is our CNPS has had the wonderful opportunity to collaborate on a number of national monument campaigns in the recent years. You'll see that there are 4 here that were designated and resulted in increased protections for nearly 1 million acres of land in California, Satilla Highlands, Moloch-Layoke, or the expansion of Berryessa Snow Mountain National Monument, the San Gabriel Mountains expansion, so that's right in your all's backyard, and also in the greater backyard of Southern California, the Chuckwalla National Monument. There's some active monument campaigns that are hoping to reach completion in coming years, called Northern Angeles, the Amargosa Basin, and the Quitson. So those 4 orange dots were designations or expansions that were put into place by President Biden, and we're hoping that should the administration change to be more favorable to conservation in future years, that we can work on some additional monument campaigns. But just to talk about that a little bit, this was a huge amount of effort, a huge effort by staff and volunteers statewide, really. I could say statewide because I think there was folks involved from dozens of chapters. These campaigns started with the conservation need in these various areas. Lots of support building all the way up until the end. Introduction of federal legislation. Site visits by the heads of agencies. One of the people in the photos down in the bottom right-hand corner is the former Interior Secretary Deb Haaland. An agency public meeting where it's basically like a big opportunity for comments, and then eventually designation, which involves presidential use of the Antiquities Act to increase protections for these lands. We learned a lot from these, and one of the things we learned is you don't really need to learn how important public meetings are and folks getting out and providing testimony, but this was a real example of how important it is for us to show our support in a public setting. We worked with chapters all around the state to prepare an outreach list. and did things like phone banking and emails and getting people to attend and provide testimony at these meetings. The first of which was considered the gold standard at the time. I'm not sure if it still is because the other ones were so spectacular. The Moloch Yoke campaign ended up turning out 200 attendees with 70 speakers, all in support, no opposition. That was one of the best days of my professional careers, of my professional career. Um, that was followed up about a year later with the Chuckwalla public meeting, National Monument public meeting, um, which was held on a weekday in the desert. I think it was in Indio, I think was where it was held, if my memory serves me correctly. It was 113 that day, but we had 700 attendees with 95% speaking in support. And then all the way up north in Shasta County, maybe it was Siskiyou County eventually, where the meeting was held. But you get the picture. The far northern part of the state, 500 attendees, with the bulk being voices from the tribal community, from the Pitt River Nation and adjacent tribal communities, where would drove the greatest number of attendees there. But talking a little bit about Moloch Yoke, this is the effort to expand Berryessa Snow Mountain Monument to include this ridge that has an awful lot of serpentine habitat. Dozens of rare plants occur there, and it was long known as a rare plant mecca. That was frequently the site of proposed wind energy development, 5 at least proposals that none of which ended up fortunately getting approved. This started out as a defense campaign, so CNPS and other organizations and members of the community continued to kind of beat back these proposals to develop this very special area, and that eventually transitioned to a large community, including a really strong tribal partnerships, specifically with the Yochadihi Winton Nation, that resulted this was our first foray into working on a national monument campaign, and it was successful in 2024 as being designated by President Biden. We ended up doing a huge amount of work on the Chuckwalla campaign, which is a large area, 600,000 acres. In the Mojave Desert, kind of to the east, and Sonoran Desert to the east of Palm Springs. Huge amount of effort by the Riverside San Bernardino chapter and Mojave Desert chapters. Lots of great congressional champions, and a strong and diverse coalition. It's protected for now. A little bit more on this in a couple of slides. And then just to talk a little bit about the Satitla Highlands campaign. This is the kind of the far northern portion of the state. There's decades of battles between geothermal development interests and the Pitt River Nation on the Pitt River Nation's sacred lands. This was a monument campaign that emerged to prevent the need for constant relitigation against these developers who wanted to develop the area for geothermal energy. The Pitt River Nation led the way the whole way, and CNPS and other organizations were invited to participate in this effort. And this was designated along with Chuckwalla in January of this year. All of those combined with the expansion of the San Gabriel Mountains National Monument, which happened along with Moloch Yoke, or the expansion of Berryessa, resulted in approximately almost 1 million acres of increased land protections on federal lands in the final year of the Biden administration. So Biden final years, I suppose, 2024 and 2025. And so a lot of the work that we endeavor to do in the coming years is guided by what are being called our CNPS campaigns. One that I won't talk about a whole lot today, which is Landscapes for Change, but I will talk. We have already been talking about it, and we'll continue to talk about saving what matters most. which is guided by and tearing off of our organizational strategic plan, which is created every 5 years. The goal, this is basically the operationalization, if that's even a word, I might have created a word, of our strategic plan into actions, including things like our advocacy core, vegetation mapping and classification, review and classification of rare plants, and things like engagement on and CEQA and CEQA projects and defense of CEQA, 30 by 30 public lands defense. So that's just you'll probably be hearing more about our campaigns in coming years if you're involved in any level at CNPS. I'm not going to dwell too much on this because it gets depressing really quickly, but our campaigns really have guided. One of the aspects of our campaigns is to track and respond to the threats to our public lands. Unless I suppose you've been on a media diet or media fast, and if you have, you've probably missed a lot of things that will give you heartburn. There's been a lot of threats to our public lands over the past year, or almost year. Lots of turmoil, funding freezes, widespread layoffs, office closures of governmental offices, a whole slew of executive orders from the Trump administration, threats to sell off our public lands through various processes. I will say that if you look at the bottom, there is a success story. There was a real concerted effort to sell off, more than 3.3 million acres of federal lands, statewide, not statewide, but nationwide, as part of the budget process. This resulted in kind of a mass mobilization of people from all around the country. Of course, CNPS members were a big part of this effort. Resulted in five key House Republicans requesting that this provision that would have sold off millions of acres of federal lands for things like housing development and other forms of development, to remove this from the budget bill. So that's an example of, even though this is undeniably a challenging time for advocacy, that there still is the opportunity for people to raise their voices and to reach out to their elected officials and to get meaningful change to occur. Continuing on with the threats to our public lands, there's been some very disturbing changes to policies and regulations, including some pretty drastic changes to how federal projects will be reviewed under the National Environmental Policy Act. That can be a whole talk in and of itself. And happy to talk with folks more about this. I need to go back. Changes to some longstanding rules, including the public land rule and the roadless rule, weakening of the Clean Water Act, some other things related to critical minerals. There's been a lot for us to track in the past several months. I feel like the past year has been the longest decade of my life as a conservation advocate. I do want to highlight some of the changes because this is really happening as we speak to the Endangered Species Act. There is some pretty disturbing legislation that has been introduced as federal legislation called HR 845, which would make some pretty drastic changes to the Endangered Species Act. This is the Federal Endangered Species Act. There's been the redefinition of what constitutes harm under the ESA. A whole slew of new proposed rules related especially to the way that consultation occurs at the federal level. The way that critical habitat is designated. This is something that we are in the process of producing comment letters on. These are active comment letters, active comment periods at this point in time. If, for example, if any of these things that I'm bringing to your attention jar your mind, something you would like to work on, I would welcome you to reach out to conservation@cnps.org, for example, if you want more information on what's going on with regard to the Endangered Species Act or any of these other things. There's been also some pretty disturbing things going on at the Forest Service level and our federal forested lands. There's an effort to increase timber production, probably not as much of an issue to be concerned with on the federal lands adjacent to you in Southern California, but it's definitely of a major concern across the rest of the United States. And there's also some efforts to create lots of new fuel breaks on federal lands, which is I'm not going to get into the specifics necessarily of why that might be a problem, because some of it actually might be not so bad idea in areas immediately adjacent to forested communities, but when these are constructed on very remote areas, it probably does more harm than good. And then, I spent a fair amount of the talk so far talking about how good it was to have the new monument designations. One of the early actions of Interior Secretary Doug Burgum was to announce that there would be a review on all national monuments to ensure that the smallest area compatible with proper management was designated. We have fortunately not seen any actions that resulted from this review of national monument size yet. However, there was one lawsuit that was filed by mining and OHV interests alleging that the designation of Chuckwalla National Monument was illegal and not consistent with federal law. This is a lawsuit called Tarango et al. Versus the Department of Interior, whereby our current federal government is the defendant. So it's the same federal agencies that we are concerned might do some bad things to decrease the size or threaten existing national monuments is charged with defending itself against this lawsuit. But I will say that fortunately, CNPS, along with some other a whole group of organizations and a group of tribes, have petitioned to be interveners in this lawsuit, which would mean that we would gain all of the rights as defendants, meaning briefing, of appealing rulings and such, and those type of things. So this is at its early stages. And it's a case with high-level implications and high-level meaning that this could go all the way to the Supreme Court. And so this is something that we are involved in. And so an example of the actions that we're willing, of course, to take to defend places like Chuckwalla National Monument. Transitioning us a little bit to slightly better news. Stepping away from the federal government and back to our good state of California. We tracked a lot of bills in California over the 2025 legislative session. Legislative session ends around October, really in September. The legislative session saw bills like AB 581, which designated a new state shrub, Arcephus glauca. So that's a plant that you can see in your own backyards there in Southern California. Some good bills related to wildfire management. Was considered an Endangered Species Act stopgap bill called AB 1319, which basically says that if the current administration does things to threaten the Federal Endangered Species Act, plants and animals that are listed under the Federal Endangered Species Act and not under the California Endangered Species Act can get provisional status under the California Endangered Species Act, and increased funding or restored funding for the Habitat Conservation Fund. You'll see photos here. This is of some of our Southern California advocates, including your own Julie Clark. At our first lobby day, our first CNPS only lobby day, which focused on wildfire related bills at the Capitol in this June. A little bit of bad news. Our very own California Environmental Quality Act has been the subject of legislation and quite frankly weakening via the passage of a piece of legislation called Senate Bill 131, which added a suite of new CEQA exemptions, including for large manufacturing projects. A little bit more on this later, because there is some light at the end of the tunnel for some of this. Just a little bit more on state wildfire legislation. I don't have to tell anybody who is there living in Southern California that there was a really bad event early in 2025 in by that I'm speaking of the Los Angeles fires that happened in the coast in the Palisades and the Eaton fires. That resulted in a whole spate of wildfire related bills. Some are good, some were good, some were bad. The challenge largely being that a lot of the legislation was slated at a one size fits all approach. We all know in California that we have an incredibly diverse state with tons of different habitats, and the practices that might be appropriate in forested habitats might not be the same. Might not be appropriate in chaparral habitats, for example. We organized this group of intrepid volunteers to go around the state offices to talk to our legislators and their staff about a variety of wildfire related bills. It was a really great day. You'll see some faces that you might know from your time with CNPS, and is an example of what we can do in the way of having CNPS advocates go to the state capitol and speak to them with our knowledge about what we would like them to do with regard to legislation. I've already talked about this a little bit. We supported a number of good bills. I'm going to kind of pass over this because I voiced this over in the last slide. We had this, one of the big wins was that one of the bills that we were supporting chiefly, which is SB 653, which promotes actions in state funded projects that are environmentally sensitive in the way of vegetation management, and that bill ended up being passed and signed by the governor. And another thing that resulted from our work in the state capitol and stemming from that wildfire lobby day was that we are strengthening relationships with our elected officials. We've already had I think 3 of these in district outings as a result of our following up on the meetings that we had in these legislative offices. Opportunities to have outings for CNPS members to go out in the field and show their elected officials or their elected officials staff, as may be the case, what firsthand issues that they're seeing in the district and what we would like them to do about it. You'll see that's Jim Hansen from our East Bay chapter talking to the representative. The staff of one of their elected officials about fuel management in the East Bay Hills. So I mentioned that there was a really bad CEQA, some really bad results for the California Environmental Quality Act in 2025. This stemmed originally from a bill that was introduced by Senator Wiener of San Francisco, which would have been which was a really damaging bill that would have kind of gutted CEQA to its core, transitioned to what's called SB 131 or Senate Bill 131, which is essentially a suite of new CEQA exemptions, so projects that wouldn't actually have to undergo any environmental review. It was a very quick process as part of the budget trailer bill process. And was signed into law in a mere 3 days between introduction and passage. the environmental community, the environmental justice community, tribes, and a whole suite of citizens were not happy with this, and have advocated for some key cleanup amendments to this bill. It didn't happen this session, but the key amendments that they're asking for is to include national and protected lands that are consistent with other existing state laws, and to remove the advanced manufacturing, which would exemption from the bill, which would allow things like, big like data centers and such to be put in adjacent to local communities without much in the way of environmental review, or no environmental review, because they would be exempt from CEQA. There is already, however, a cleanup bill called AB 1083, introduced by Assemblymember Damon Connolly. The bill already has 20 co-authors, and it includes key fixes to that terrible SB 131 bill. It's already scheduled for an early hearing in January on January 12th. So there are 20 co-authors, but it would be great if there were more. So if you are interested in doing advocacy on behalf of this bill, and asking and making sure that your legislators are on that key list of 20 co-authors and that growing list of co-authors, let us know. Please email us at me at njensen@cnps.org or conservation@cnps.org, and we will help you to do that advocacy. And I know it's already 8 o'clock, and I've already been speaking for a while here, but to kind of emphasize how dire of a state we are in with regard to increased efforts to revise our core environmental review law, the California Environmental Quality Act. Some of you may have already heard about this. The California Chamber of Commerce has introduced a ballot initiative that would do all kinds of very, very damaging things to the public's ability to comment on projects in their local area, including housing, clean energy, water, public health, and a whole host of other projects that would be streamlined as a result of this ballot initiative, including things like reduced comment periods, some legal changes, and so this is we're hoping that this does not go forward, but this is definitely something that we're monitoring closely. So this is the looking forward portion of the talk. And I'm going to use this looking forward portion of the talk to focus on our advocacy core. Some of you may have already heard about this. I heard, Snowdy, that you signed up for this to be a part of the advocacy core, and thank you for doing so. And if folks in the audience have already done this, thank you as well. This is our growing and definitely a nascent effort to strengthen CNPS's grassroots advocacy by building the skills, resources, and a network. And the network needed to take action especially on things like statewide legislation and things like that. Then our initiative called the Advocacy Core will allow us to mobilize supporters, provide a platform for information sharing and education, and ensure that advocates feel prepared to engage when, for example, we send an action alert that says, hey, contact your local representatives. You know how to do that, and you know who your local representatives are, and it's not just a daunting thing that we're asking you to do. So this has kind of been some of the things that we're endeavoring for. We have these action alerts and action hours and advocacy days, the calls for immediate action. And we're doing some long-term strategic planning, including the webinars that are open to anyone who wants to be involved, skill building and overall growing the movement of CNPS advocates statewide who want to do advocacy for native plants and habitats. This was initially developed by a small group of CNPS volunteers from around the state, but now this is the call to you all. This is a call to everyone. So any CNPS members or CNPS supporters who want to be involved are welcome to join this effort and learn the skills that they need to play a increased role or and more in-depth role in support of native plants and what we are intending to do from an advocacy perspective. There's a QR code there that that you would be able to scan, but I think I might be moving too quick at this point in time for you to do so. Once again, if you're interested in this in joining the Advocacy Corps, you can get in touch with us at conservation@cnps.org. But this is just a timeline of what's been going on. We did the public launch of the Advocacy Corps in May of this year with an introductory webinar on relationship building with decision makers, how to actually develop good relationships with your local elected officials. That was a webinar that was put on by us, but the speakers were Vern Gehring, our former lobbyist, and Kim Delfino, our current lobbyist. We held our second quarterly webinar in August on advocacy related to that bad CEQA bill, SB 131, and we also released our first action brief, which is a newsletter that all Advocacy Corps members will get that talks about news and how to get involved and opportunities for engagement as a result of being a part of the Corps. Today, we now have 140 advocates signed up to be a part of this effort. And our next Advocacy Corps webinar will be held in January and focuses on bolstering urban biodiversity through native plant landscaping ordinances and resolutions. So the next Advocacy Corps webinar, called a resolution for resolutions, is going to be held on January 14th at 6 p.m. You can register at this link. I'm happy to share this presentation with folks as well if you would like to have access to these QR codes or links. This is going to focus on local resolutions in promotion of native plant uses in the urban environment. So that's a note about Advocacy Corps. It's not just advocacy in the way of in necessarily in conservation space, but advocacy also in support of native plant landscaping and stuff like that. Last but not least, this is just a kind of the rah-rah slide about what you can do. I know a number of us who have been paying attention to what's been going on, especially at the federal level, have felt a little bit disillusioned or upset about what we can do to try and protect the places that we love. The truth is that our legislators, our congressional reps, still care about what we have to say. So watch for action alerts and days of action. Certainly getting involved in the Advocacy Corps is an opportunity for you to learn how to do this with the most effect. Look for these opportunities to call, email, and write your elected representatives and let them know what you think about key issues and what you would like them to do. Obviously, joining the Advocacy Corps is something that you can do to continue your education. Noting that we are looking for people to meet, actually do in-person meetings with their elected officials at some key districts in Southern California. If you are interested in meeting with your own representatives, you can attend trainings. And if you are in these key districts, there are some, and I'll let my colleague Isabel inform you if you are interested in this about those key districts. Is Nairn at cnps.org, that's Isabel Nairn, who works with me, is the person to contact if you are interested in actually potentially meeting with your elected officials. And with that, I know I've gone through an awful lot of information and also I did not want to show that slide. Awful large number of issues over the course of the past, I guess, hour or so. I felt like I was moving quite quickly here this evening. So I wouldn't be surprised if there were some questions. I'm going to stop sharing my screen so we all can see one another once again, and I'm happy to answer your questions if there are any.
Well, one question that came up in the chat was about zone zero.
Right. Yeah. And was there a specific question about Zone Zero?
Well, I guess the question is you didn't address it,
Yeah.
and it's been a big deal.
Yeah. Well, the Zone Zero is something that is definitely something that we are tracking. I will note that we hosted a webinar this summer on it, or a whole conversation on it, that made it very clear to me that there was a lot of discordance around the state on what we should be doing with regard to Zone Zero as an organization. And I think it's definitely like, I definitely think that it's something um, that would, that benefits from advocacy. Um, but it is, I think a lot of the efforts that have been going on in recent months have been in trying to make what is inevitably going to happen with CAL FIRE's rulemaking on this as gentle as possible on native plant communities, especially some of the related to native trees that are adjacent to people's houses, and kind of making those rules less draconian. So I'm not sure I've done a huge amount of justice to the issue in my answer. Um, it's just to say that it's an incredibly complicated issue, I would say.
Hazel Gordon has her hand up. Hazel, do you want to unmute yourself and speak?
Oh, sure. Hi, Nick. I haven't seen you in 8 or 10
Hi,
years.
Hazel.
Yeah, so I used to be a member for other people, left the state, and now in Colorado.
Oh, cool.
In I'm still a member, of course, here, but we're starting kind of an advocacy core initiative, I think, through the Native Plant Society here. And I was looking for tips from you. But the one thing that occurred to me is how you get people who are not members interested. You
Yeah.
as a conservation, you mentioned the tribal groups. Well, we don't have that type of core population here. But how would you go about finding other people who are really interested in plants to save them?
Well, okay, so one of the things that is true, um, is that a lot that I do think that kind of some of the ways that when I joined CNPS back when I was like 18 years old, a long time ago,
Hmm.
where you would send your check-in to an organization so that you could get the mailings that the organization is doing, is that's not really the way that younger people and a lot of the new this current generation is engaging with conservation issues. A
Hmm.
lot of the people that are currently you doing stuff on behalf of CNPS find out about us through social media. And our social media accounts have many times the number of followers than our
Hmm.
membership has. I think our Instagram account has more I mean, I don't know what it is now. It's tens of thousands compared
Hmm.
to our 13,000 number of paid members. And many of those people align themselves deeply with CNPS and want to do
Hmm.
stuff with us. So I think that if you want to engage with people these days, and this is something I'm like not like I'm not really super up on social media, but I think a social media strategy is key for engaging with people these days,
Hmm.
and
Okay.
especially getting younger people involved and people who are not likely to do the classic route of membership in an organization, which
Hmm.
unfortunately is a lot of people these days, especially younger
Hmm.
people.
Okay. Yeah, thanks.
Another question that came up is exactly what would Kara Fisher do to arrange plant tours for legislatures?
That's a great question, though. So we have, so we would put you in contact with the actual your legislator's office. So finding the right person to contact, the scheduler, and then and providing so the those requests for tours would best come from you as a constituent. But what we would do is provide you with the right language to use in contacting them for scheduling, and then also the contact information. And then one thing that we've done in some of the tours that have taken place so far is we've also offered to attend the tours with the members as well. So it's been a staff person attending along with the members. So it's really just providing you with the logistical support and the language that you need to actually reach out to the legislators. So if you are interested in doing this, definitely reach out to me or reach out to Kara, and we would love to help move that along.
Okay. I guess the the other thing too would be finding out who the key people are, the legislators that you guys are really want to zero in on. And are we their constituents, right?
So
Um,
I can say that some of the legislators that are most of interest are some of those, like there's Representative Kim, who's in Orange County. There is Obernolte, which is in the desert mountain communities, and Calvert, which is like San Bernardino County. So I'm not exactly sure if anyone in this audience is from those areas. There's some other key targeted districts in kind of the Sierra area. But if you are interested in that kind of work, just because you're not part of the key district, we want to hear from you and connect with you because, just because, if you don't live in a key district today, doesn't mean you won't live in one tomorrow, depending on the issues that are at hand.
I guess a question would be like for our chapter, um, is it something that would be a good idea for us just to, even there, though maybe our people aren't, the legislators aren't targeted,
Right.
is it still a good idea to say, let's schedule a not wildflower hike
Yes.
and invite them along, or just say,
Absolutely.
or if we were going to, one thing I can think of is an issue around here is rim of the valley,
Sure.
and that's a federal thing. Getting people on board with that, if we were to have another rim of the valley spring hike, is that something?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. So basically, we're more likely to have success in advocacy, especially from the legislative perspective, if those relationships are developed. If you've actually taken the time to invite a legislator or their staff on a hike or go out to see wildflowers, um, then you already have that relationship. And then when you actually need to call upon them to do something for you, those relationships are already developed. Um, it's also a way that I mean, many of us fortunately live in districts where our legislators do the right thing most of the time. So also an opportunity to say thank you for the good work that they're doing. So if your chapter wants to do this kind of thing, please contact us. We will provide you with the support that you hopefully, I mean, you probably don't even need our support, but you might need some guidance and just some language to use. And I think that, Vern Gehring, who was our lobbyist for like 20 years, he was always emphasizing this, that it's all about relationships. That pretty much we can do a lot more to cultivate those relationships with our elected officials so that when we need to call upon them to do something for us, they're there for us.
Okay.
Yeah.
And one thing I do want to comment a little bit on that zone zero aspect. Um, and this isn't something that I think is out there for the general public, but just to comment that the larger issue for CNPS is not that particular set of maps with zone zero or non-zero. Uh, Currently, CNPS is working on a very large revised wildfire policy.
Yeah.
And I think some of those zone zero issues are touched on in that policy, which is being worked on and maybe will be ready for public view within the next 6 months.
Yeah.
And
Well, I
it
think
was my understanding, Nick, that really CNPS was not taking any kind of stand or formal position on zone zero. Is that true?
to my knowledge, we have not. Yeah.
Okay.
And
Well,
I'm
those
and
are,
I'm and
yeah.
it's not an issue that I've worked on in great detail. But I will say we certainly have taken a stand on wildfire, like appropriate wildfire mitigation practices that that like a lot of the home hardening aspects that are probably more effective than clearing those some of the areas around people's houses and um, overall, vegetation management and people's properties that is beyond the 0 to 5 zone. So I think I think you're right that our wildfire policy will be more holistic and will help with guidance on a variety of issues, including that. But we don't have a formal position on zone zero.
Okay.
Yeah.
The other thing that I also want to bring up is it seems like in the Santa Monica Mountains that especially MRCA has gotten state funding to grind up large pieces of open space, chaparral, without any public review at all.
Yeah, that's true.
And the governor has supported this, and it's happening even as we speak. And you mentioned that one successful wildfire bill that I guess the fine print on that isn't covering.
No, it wouldn't. I mean, so a lot of that work is being done under like government. I mean, there's executive orders that the governor has, like emergency orders that the governor has issued and that issued after the LA fires. There's existing exemptions that some of the work may be being done under. So the legislator has passed exemptions that say you don't have to do environmental review if certain conditions are met. There are, I don't know if some of that work has been done on federal lands, but if there's federal lands, that's a whole other issue because there could be federal exemptions. Um, there's things like the Cal Fire's vegetation treatment program, which is
Mhm.
a programmatic environmental document that projects can tier off of. So that is to say, there are a lot of tools that are being used to promote projects like that. And I don't know, I know my depth of knowledge on what you're talking about is there's an article in the LA Times like a couple weeks ago on it, or maybe a month ago.
Yeah, a month ago.
Um, I think even in the article, the state officials acknowledge that what they're doing what probably won't do much for wildfire prevention. I think in
Well,
the article.
it was Dan Cooper who works
Yeah.
for the Resource Conservation District
Right.
as a scientist who commented that it was a total waste of time and money,
I think it
but
is. Yeah.
it is destroying habitat. I guess there's not much we can do. They've given them the money and there's no environmental review and it's,
Yeah.
it's done.
Well, yeah. I mean, I hate to say anything is done, but it does seem like that project has a tremendous amount of political support behind it, you know. And
Okay.
there's a lot of what's happened post the LA fires hasn't been grounded by science or really anything, hasn't it? I mean, it's been like it's reactionary. We've got to do something because we had these terrible disastrous fires and it's all too much, there's a lot of human nature involved, I suppose.
Okay. All right. Any other questions, folks? Well, I thank you guys all for attending, and I hope you will join the Conservation Corps,
Yeah, thank you everyone for
Conservation
taking your
Advocacy Corps. Yeah.
thank you for taking your time out of your busy schedules to listen this evening. I appreciate it very much.
I just appreciate all that CNPS and you guys, the staff, um, and all those volunteers too. And because
Yeah,
we have, good people in our conservation committee here in our chapter. It
yeah,
really is a group effort, but it's sometimes feels very frustrating and hard to deal with, but I really appreciate that you keep at it.
yeah. Well,
And
yeah, conservation work is
yeah, Carol is saying, thank you, Nick, for fighting the good
thanks,
fight. I
Carol.
mean, it's
No,
like,
I mean conservation work is heartbreaking. So
yeah, if you have a few triumphs, but
yeah,
it is sometimes, I know I used to do a lot of testifying and things like that, and it really took a lot of out of me psychologically. It's
yeah, I
really
can
tough
imagine.
dealing with. Yeah. So
Yeah.
thanks so much. But
Thank you, Snowdy, and thanks everyone. I hope you have a good rest of your evening.
yeah, good
All right,
evening, guys. I'm
take
gonna
care. Right.
close.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.